To my daughter Brenda, I leave the family estate. The lawyer's words hung in the air of the stuffy legal office, but they were immediately drowned out by my Aunt Brenda's obnoxious squeal of victory. Beside her, my cousin Kyle aggressively pumped his fist like he had just won the Super Bowl. I sat in the corner, staring blankly at my hands. The lawyer cleared his throat and looked at me with a hint of pity. And to my granddaughter, I leave the wooden cedar box in the attic. Brenda burst into a cruel, cackling laugh. She literally walked over to the corner of the room, picked up a dusty, moldy-looking wooden box, and dropped it right onto my lap. Dust flew up into my face. "There you go, sweetheart." Brenda sneered, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You wiped her drool for 3 years, and all you got was a box of literal trash. You can use it to keep warm when you're sleeping on the streets." Kyle snickered, recording my humiliation on his phone. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought they had walked away with millions. But they were about to learn that my grandmother was the most brilliant, ruthless woman to ever live. To understand the pure venom in that room, you need to know what the last 3 years of my life looked like. When Grandma was diagnosed with terminal illness, Brenda was nowhere to be found. She was too busy taking luxury vacations to Cabo, while Kyle was failing out of his 3rd expensive private college. I was the one who dropped out of my master's program. I was the one who moved into the mansion, sleeping on a cot at the foot of Grandma's bed. I changed her IVs, cooked her meals, held her hand through the agonizing nights, and listened to her stories. Brenda only visited on major holidays, and only to snoop around the house, measuring the walls for the renovations she planned to make once Grandma was finally out of the picture. Grandma saw everything. She never said a word, but her sharp eyes tracked Brenda's greedy little fingers every time she entered a room. Exactly 2 days after the funeral, Brenda didn't even wait for the dirt to settle on the grave. I returned from a grocery run to find the heavy iron gates of the mansion locked. All of my clothes, my books, and the few belongings I owned were stuffed into black garbage bags and tossed onto the driveway. Brenda was standing on the grand balcony, holding a glass of wine. "The locks are changed," she shouted down at me. "This is my house now. I don't want your depressing energy ruining my new aesthetic. Take your box of trash and get off my property before I call the cops for trespassing." I stood there in the freezing rain, holding the dusty wooden box to my chest. I had nowhere to go. I had 0 savings because I had spent everything caring for Grandma. I called an Uber, loaded my garbage bags, and rented the cheapest, dingiest motel room I could find on the edge of town. Sitting on a stained mattress in a room that smelled like old cigarettes, I finally opened the cedar box. The hinges creaked loudly. Inside, it looked like exactly what Brenda said it was: garbage. There was a stack of yellowed, thick papers covered in weird stamps, a rolled-up canvas that looked like a dusty, muddy painting of a boat, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened the letter. It was Grandma's handwriting, elegant and shaky. "My dearest girl," it read. Asterisk, if you are reading this, the vultures have shown their true colors. Brenda thinks she won the castle, but she doesn't know the walls are made of sand. Do not throw these papers away. Take them to Arthur Pendleton in the city. I love you, and I made sure you will never have to worry again. Let them choke on their greed. Asterisk, my heart started pounding. What did she mean? The next morning, I skipped breakfast and took a bus to the high-end financial district, carrying the box. I found Arthur Pendleton's appraisal and estate firm. When I unrolled the muddy painting and placed the stack of papers on his mahogany desk, his eyes widened so much I thought they would pop out of his skull. He put on white cotton gloves, his hands visibly shaking. "Miss," he whispered, "do you have any idea what you are holding?" I shook my head. Arthur took a deep breath. "These papers are unregistered bearer bonds from the 1980s. They're as good as pure cash, completely untraceable, and worth about $6 million. With accumulated interest. And this painting, it's a lost maritime piece by a Dutch master. Collectors have been hunting for this for decades. It will fetch at least $4 million at Sotheby's." I collapsed into the leather chair. $10 million. My grandmother hadn't left me a box of trash. She had left me an empire in a wooden box. But wait, if Grandma had $10 million in liquid assets, Why didn't she just leave me the money in the will? Arthur smiled a wicked, knowing smile and pulled up a real estate database. Your grandmother was a genius. She knew Brenda would contest the will and drag you through court for years to steal the money. So, 2 years ago, your grandmother quietly took out a massive reverse mortgage on the family mansion. She borrowed millions against the house, drained all the equity, and used the cash to buy these untraceable bonds for you. My jaw dropped. The mansion was completely underwater. It was essentially owned by the bank. Grandma had legally left Brenda a $3 million house that carried a $4 million debt. She had handed Brenda a poisoned apple, and Brenda had taken the biggest, greediest bite possible. Over the next few weeks, I remained completely silent. I watched from afar as Brenda and Kyle made absolute fools of themselves. My Instagram feed was flooded with Kyle's posts, him posing on the hood of a brand new Lamborghini, popping champagne at VIP clubs. Brenda was posting videos of luxury contractors gutting the mansion's kitchen for a $200,000 renovation. What they were doing was taking out massive, high-interest personal loans and credit lines, using the mansion as collateral. They were borrowing money against a house that already belonged to the bank. They were digging their own financial graves, piling millions of dollars of debt onto a sinking ship, completely blinded by their own arrogance. While they were out buying Gucci bags on credit, I was quietly securing my future. I worked with Arthur to officially cash in the bearer bonds. The $6 million hit my brand new private banking account with a satisfying ding. A week later, the painting sold at a private auction in New York for $4.5 million. I paid my taxes, hired a top-tier wealth management team, and bought myself a tailored, understated designer suit. I didn't buy a Lamborghini. I didn't post on social media. I just sat back, sipping espresso in my new luxury penthouse, watching the calendar, waiting for the bank's grace period on Grandma's reverse mortgage to officially expire. The bomb was ticking, and it was about to go off. 3 months after the funeral, Brenda threw a massive mansion renovation reveal party. It was a grotesque display of fake wealth. She hired a valet service, a live string quartet, and a champagne fountain. All of her snobby, high society friends were there. I wasn't invited, of course, but I showed up anyway. I walked through the heavy oak doors wearing a $3,000 tailored suit, looking sharper than anyone in the room. Brenda spotted me and her face turned purple with rage. She marched over, her high heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. "Who let the rat back in?" she hissed. "Are you here to beg for scraps? Security is going to throw you out in exactly 10 seconds. I just smiled, taking a sip of champagne. "Oh, Brenda," I said calmly, "I wouldn't worry about me. I'd worry about the guests arriving at the front door right now." Right as she turned around, the music abruptly stopped. 3 men in dark suits, accompanied by 2 armed sheriff's deputies, walked straight into the center of the ballroom. The lead man held up a thick legal document. "Brenda Thompson? We are representatives from Chase Bank Real Estate Division. We're here to serve an official notice of immediate foreclosure and eviction." The entire ballroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Brenda let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Excuse me? There must be a mistake. I own this house. It's fully paid off." The banker shook his head. "No, ma'am. The late owner took out a reverse mortgage maxing out the property's equity. With the accrued interest, the estate owes the bank $4.2 million. The grace period expired yesterday. Furthermore, we are aware you've taken out secondary loans against this property. You are completely insolvent." Brenda's face drained of all color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto a velvet chair. Kyle dropped his champagne glass, shattering it on the marble. "No, no, that's impossible." Brenda shrieked, looking wildly around the room at her whispering, judgmental friends. "Where did the money go?" That was my cue. I stepped forward, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "It went into the wooden box, Brenda. The one you threw at my face." Brenda stared at me, trembling. I reached into my designer purse and pulled out my recent bank statement. I didn't hand it to her. I just casually let it flutter down onto her lap. She looked down, her eyes tracking the zeros. $10,500,000. Grandma knew you were a vulture, I whispered so only she could hear. She made sure you inherited the debt, while I inherited the empire. The aftermath was the most beautiful disaster I have ever witnessed. Brenda and Kyle were escorted off the property by the sheriffs in front of 100 of their most gossipy friends. Because they had taken out millions in fraudulent personal loans using the underwater house as collateral, they were forced into brutal bankruptcy. Kyle's Lamborghini was repossessed the very next day. They went from claiming the mansion to living in a cramped, roach-infested studio apartment, drowning in legal fees. As for me, when the bank officially put the mansion up for auction a month later, I bought it back in cash at a massive discount. I kept Grandma's room exactly the way it was. Yesterday, Brenda had the audacity to show up at the front gates, crying and begging me for a loan to keep Kyle out of jail for credit fraud. I looked at her through the iron bars, smiled warmly, and said, "I'm sorry, Brenda. All I have is this box of trash." Then I turned around, walked into my multi-million-dollar home, and locked the gates.